Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supernatural as well as the series premiere of Legacies. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Supernatural, you can skip to what I say about the series premiere of Legacies. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Supernatural. Now let's break down this episode. So obviously we're picking up with this Dean thing. I brought it up at the end of last week's episode. I was not certain that this was really Dean. I thought this was all part of Michael's plan. I still on some level kind of think so, but it seems less and less likely, especially as the episode went on. But there's still some inkling in me that still thinks like it's just a little too smooth, you know? Because I thought everything that went down this episode, I was like, it's all a calculated plan. I felt like this was all, because we ended up finding out like Dean's got a wound on his arm from a spear that hurt Michael, and it comes from the killer who killed Kaya, which I was actually surprised because I kept wondering, I was like, okay, when are we going to circle back to that storyline? And it's like, oh, we're circling back to it now because it's neck deep in this Michael situation. I thought that was pretty nice how they like tied that out together, because like they have not cut back to that since like that situation popped up last season. Like last thing we saw was that episode when Kaya died and that other Kaya came into this world. That's the last thing we saw of it last season. So I was so surprised. And we're also getting it so early in the season too. So that's pretty interesting. But it seems like basically the weapon that she wields can hurt Michael. And so it turns into a whole situation. And for one, it's like, hey, this is the thing from the other world that killed Kaya, so they bring Jody in because there's also been murders connected to this. Later on, we end up finding out those murders were actually vampires. So it's like, okay, because at first I was confused. I was like, okay, but Jody examined the bodies. So I was like, but nothing came up vampires. So like, oh, because that in my mind made me go all conspiracy theories. Like, obviously, Dean Michael set up all these murders ahead of time to make it seem like it was her. Because I was thinking in my head, I was like, he figured it was more dangerous to go after this thing alone, so he's pretending to be Dean so he can get the hunters' help and everything like that. Which, in retrospect, I quickly started thinking about too. It's like, all right, that's stupid. Because as powerful as Michael is, he wouldn't need allies or anything like that. But then I thought, like, maybe he felt like it'd be easier to kind of get around her with, like, being distracted by other people. Then it's like, well, why not have it? Like I thought, like I said, I kind of created this conspiracy theory. Like I said, on some level, there's still part of me that's like, Michael's still got to be in there. He's got to buried himself so deep that no one realizes it, but we'll see in the long run. But it was just kind of an interesting situation. But then it's like, oh yeah, they cleared my thought process up about it being like, right. The vampires are souped up just like the werewolves are. So far, they're the only supernatural creatures he souped up. But we don't know who else he might have done this for. The whole situation brings up an interesting aspect. For one, it's like the whole like Dean rushing forward and it's kind of what Dean does. He kind of goes full steam ahead when there's a problem in front of him rather than really facing it. He kind of like tries to bury himself in work, and like that's kind of his go-to move. Always has been. It's like, I'd rather get on a new case, especially in this regard, because it's like this is a weapon that will help us kill Michael, and he realizes that. He even brings it up later on, even going as far as that he was going to go against this other Kaya. He was about to torture her. He was kind of, just the look on his face, just how he handled the whole situation of like, because he was so desperate to find a weapon to kill Michael, all the terrible stuff that Michael did, because ultimately he blames himself for everything. Like, not only, did he not, in his mind, it's like, I didn't fight back. I wasn't strong enough to face against Michael. Because, it doesn't come up, but I'm sure on some level in Dean's head, he blames himself even more, because think about it. What happened back in season 5? Sam took control of Lucifer long enough to throw himself in a pit. And, Dean's probably thinking on some level, like, I couldn't do that. Sam did it when it came to Lucifer, but I didn't. Like, even when it came to the whole situation in season 11 with God's sister, Sam refused to say yes to Lucifer. When the time came for me to say yes to Michael, I did. No matter what the situation is, we could have found another way. And I knew what kind of a bastard Michael is, but I said yes anyway because I was naive and stupid enough. Just because, it's like, in those situations, especially when it comes to his brother, especially in that particular case, it was his brother and Jack being in a crosshairs of Lucifer. He became hyper focused and didn't think about like, you shouldn't trust this dude because we saw what he did to one other world. So how do you expect him to really keep his word? So there's that whole situation. So he blames himself for that. He can't, because for him, it's like everything that Michael's doing is all on him. Kind of add some levity to it. I do like this situation of like, he sees Sam and he's just like, I don't understand this dude, and talking about Sam's beard, and Sam's like, some people like it. He's like, dude, nobody really likes it. And then Jody talks about, oh, look at you, Sam. And he's like, and then Sam's like, clearing his throat and looking at Dean. He just kind of rolls his eyes, just like, oh, give me a break, dude. I love that. I also love when he ends up shooting the chair, because I was like, cause the way he was aiming the gun, I was like, oh, is he really about to shoot the other guy? Because it's like, if she's dead, they can't find the weapon. I mean, to be fair, that means that he wouldn't be able to. I was like, is he about to cross that line? It's like, no, shoots the chair that she gets free, and he's like, oh, you're about to be in trouble. And she jumps out the window to leave, and he's like, or not, which I was hoping she'd come back to save them anyway, but I still thought that was kind of interesting. In the long run, I thought that was kind of fascinating. That one moment in him be like, oh shit, she left. We did learn a little bit of interesting things from the whole Kaya situation, a little more about her, and because I was thinking like maybe she killed Kaya because it's like, oh, now that Kaya is dead, she can come to this world. Because that begs the question to me, like, I think it's kind of fascinating. Why didn't she come here at any point in time? Because she says it's more than just a doppelganger situation. She's like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is, like, our connection ran a little bit deeper, which we kind of elaborated on that a little bit more, because she is a dream walker, like the Kaya from this world, that basically they kind of were mirror images to each other, like what one Kaya saw, the other Kaya saw. Well, I mean, Kaya from the bad place saw, which is why she knew who Dean kind of was beforehand, because she saw firsthand kind of what kind of personality he was. It's like, oh yeah, you and Michael have a lot of similarities. And I guess that's why they're kind of like the main host, like why he's the host for Michael, whereas Sam was a host for Lucifer, because they shared some personalities, the whole brother bond and stuff like that, who they represented in their respective situations. So, but it's always kind of like, Dean's always kind of got that mean streak in him, kind of, you could make the argument he kind of got that from their dad. Dean takes more after their dad, and Sam takes more after their mom. So he's the one that kind of, more wears his heart on his shoulders. But the same argument could be made for Dean. Dean wears his heart on his shoulder, but he tries super hard to make you think he doesn't, So I think that's how the whole situation comes down, and it makes, Dean kind of remember a lot of stuff that he didn't want to remember about, like, kind of bits and pieces of the whole situation. But getting back to what I was trying to talk about with Kaya is, the fact of the matter is, it's like you're a dream walker, but at no point in time did you pop over to this world. I guess no matter, even if you are a dream walker, like, to get over to this world isn't an easy thing either. Like, you need a rift to be open, and that whole situation led to a rift being open, so it made it easier to get over to this world. She probably like slipped through before it completely closed, so there's probably that. But I'm also thinking there must be some like dimensional situation where it's like two beings, doppelgangers, can exist in the same world, dimension or whatever. Because like, we've not come across that situation, because it's like, the other Bobby in this world is dead. So it's okay for that Bobby to exist in this one. I mean, anytime they went over there, because they don't exist, Sam and Dean don't exist in that other world, the Mary of that world was dead too. So there was no crossover in that regard. So that does beg the question, like, is that a situation of like people from like the same person, can't exist in their doppelganger's universe unless that doppelganger no longer exists. So that might add fuel to that situation. Maybe not, like I said, it might just simply be the first thing, it might be the second thing, or it might be a combination of the two of how and why now of all time she ends up coming here. So I am curious, like, what she plans on doing. I mean, this world is so much better than her original world, because I was just kind of like, yeah, that's not a place you want to live. I mean, because to be fair, we haven't fully explored that world, so we don't know who or what else exists in that world. We just know that place sucks. So that begs the question, like, why does that Kaya exist there? Maybe with her kind of popping into the story, playing into it in some shape or form, we'll kind of explain that a little bit more, because obviously she's on Michael's list, because one, it's like, hey, join my army. You're not going to join my army? Okay, you're going to die, because I need that spear, because if he has that spear, the only weapon that exists that could hurt him, which, to be fair, if it killed him, I mean, at any point in time, it'd kill whatever host he's in too, which I assume that would kind of apply. But the question then becomes, like, Does he have any other plans with it besides making sure it's not around to kill him? Does he have something else he could potentially use it against? I mean, because there's no one else in existence currently with his power level. Literally every archangel that could rival him in power is dead. I don't think there's anyone in existence, especially now that Jack doesn't have his powers. I doubt I mean, to be fair, he's in, his true, at the time he was in Dean's body, so he was at his fullest strength. So I doubt even Jack would have been able to compare, but who knows, So that begs the question, like, what else planned would he have for the spear, or just remove it from the equation entirely? I mean, they never got an answer for it because they didn't bother asking, but it's like, well, what's up with that spear? I guess it's kind of like the demon knife of like, don't worry about how and why it does what it does. It simply just does what it does. So I think it's kind of chalked up to that too. So this whole situation does put Jodie in a very complex situation because like it just reminded her of losing Kaya because like, oh, everything's just kind of been good, Claire's been kind of good lately and just everything all over the board. But it's like, now it's like, it's just a reminder of just like what this life can take from you. Because I think she let it slip her mind, but this is just a constant reminder of like, yeah, she's raising 3 hunters, that being Claire, Alex, and Patience. And it's like, at any point in time, this world could take them from her, and it's just kind of, that realization just kind of hits her every time because she's gonna have to tell Claire the truth about it because it's like it's not right for me to hide this truth about it. So got to let her know that Kaya's killer is here in this world, and probably also the doppelganger angle to it. So I'm sure we're gonna see that pop up in some shape or form, the whole Claire thing, because we ended up getting clarification for it. It's not like she killed Kaya specifically so that she'd come over into this world. It's like no, like she was trying to kill Claire, but it was an accident. So I guess because she's caught up in her own situation, she doesn't need to really worry about killing them. I guess it was just kind of like she didn't really know who they were, didn't know who she could really trust. So she thought they're just invaders. She thought maybe there were people trying to kill her, trying to take what little she had or something like that. So maybe that's why, because it's like at this point in time, you're not in a real fight or flight type of mood or mode. And well, you kind of were because you fought them off before, but you didn't kill them. You came all the way back to save them too. She was saying more so she was wiping out the vampires, but I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, maybe on some level she feels indebted to them because she sees, like, because she saw through Kaya's eyes about Sam and Jodie, maybe even Dean, even with this complicated situation, that, I don't know, maybe, like I said, we don't know what her interaction was like in the bad place with other people, like if there were any, So, maybe that's just a big part of it too. Like she didn't have the best experience with humans. Maybe she had none at all. Because the biggest question of walking away from this situation is like, holy crap, is Michael really going? I cannot stress that enough. I don't think he is. But if he is, why leave? Like maybe being in Dean's body with that wound was actually too painful or what? Or did he find a different host? I don't think finding a different host would matter because you need Dean's body. Can archangels leave bodies just like that? Either way, I mean, Lucifer's situation was kind of like, he was kind of trapped in the body that he was trapped in. But even he never flip-flopped bodies a lot. It's like, why would you? Because you're strongest in your main host. But to be fair, he's building up this army and everything, so maybe he feels like if he gets a strong enough vessel, he can get a vessel that's even stronger and more durable than Dean's body. Maybe that's what he's trying to do in that regard. I mean, that's also the big question too. An army for what? I mean, like I said, it's crazy to me because I thought you'd be quick to wanting to wipe out monsters and stuff like that. But to be fair, look at the other world. I guess for him, it's like, I'm going to amass this army and basically wipe out humans and just everything else that I just don't like, that doesn't, fit me. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I severely don't understand Michael's ambitions or his goals in that regard. So I'm very interested to find out and try and understand what his whole deal is. Then on the other side of things, obviously you have Jack feeling, continuing to feel like he really has no place in all of this because, he's kind of tired of being treated like a kid and put to the sideline. So he's about to leave until he finds out the situation about this girl, Laura, who is the only survivor of this whole witch situation. And there's this aging curse on her. Castiel tries to use his power. It doesn't work. They're trying to use this spell and stuff like that. It doesn't work. And I think Jack on some level, because initially he was going to leave until this situation came about. And he felt, no, I got to stay. That I think that conversation with her probably hit some markers for him because it's like, oh, like he hated this. She hated this. She hated that. She hated her mom's rules. She hated that people kind of treated her like a kid. So she tried to go out on her own, which Jack was literally about to do because he was kind of set in everyone's rules and kind of had to do what other people told him to do. So that finally bothered him. So it's kind of interesting because Nick left a note and just left, which we know what Nick's up to. The group doesn't, but still. I wonder, has that conversation happened with Dean yet? Because it's going to be interesting when Nick just walks back in and Dean's like, what the hell? Probably going to be something similar to that. Maybe not. Maybe they sat him down and explained everything about that. Or, maybe they just want Dean to focus on one thing at a time. I did also think it was kind of interesting. I like Dean walking in to see everything happening. And he's like, the dude's like, no. He's like, dude, I'm Dean. I'm not Michael. He's like, oh, no worries. The chief told us. And he turns to Sam, the chief. He's like, yeah, I told them not to call me that anymore. Which is like, it's pretty dope that they're calling you that. I mean, he kind of has been running things. And like I said, I think that's an interesting development for like Sam's character. And the fact is that he's kind of leading this massive like hunter operation like that. Like I said, the Winchesters were famous before being just like the badass hunters that they were, but in no shape or form were they like in charge of this huge network like this in that regard. So that's pretty cool. And like I said, I like that because it's interesting because like the show its main characters have always been Sam and Dean for most of the series, and it's like now like we're also getting like recurring like hunters and stuff like that in the sense of like this huge network of them, because there's familiar, there's hunters that became more and more familiar, would pop up from time to time, like your Claires or your Garths or obviously your Bobbies for best and prime example. So there's that side of things. So I thought it was kind of interesting, like Dean coming across that. Sadly, Laura died, and I was like, oh man, that sucks. But then Jack ended up figuring out the whole situation. Which I thought was kind of interesting, is like, in the state that the witch was in, basically the curse or the spell or whatever that constantly took away their youth and gave it to her was still kind of in effect. So basically, even while she was lying there dying, it was still happening to Laura. That's why it was happening faster, because the spell was trying to compensate for the fact that the witch was dead, and it kind of kicked into overdrive. That's why the spell was happening faster in this regard. Smashing it was enough to kind of bring Laura back to life. So even though he's not the most well-trained, well-skilled hunter, I like the fact is that Cassio was like, the fact is you have a mind and a heart of a hunter. Like, we wouldn't have figured that situation out, but you did. So which I love that Cassio was kind of like, oh, we should, I'll ask Sam and Dean about it, but, go on a hunting trip, which obviously there's a double entendre there, which I don't, because in my head, I'm thinking of an innuendo, because I think of a double, like, it's a whole thing in my head about, like, me initially when I was thinking about the word double entendre, or, like, misinterpreting it in my head for whatever. But it's just kind of interesting. Obviously, they're like, oh, a hunting trip is in, like, hunting monsters, but there's also, like, hey, father-son hunting, which is kind of interesting, which is kind of the whole point, which I think makes that a little funny and weird on some level. But, yeah. But it seems that Jack is sick. The question is, like, it seems like there were a lot of tissues. Is that just from now? Has this condition already been active for a while, or is it just fairly recent? I mean, it might have been something he's been hiding from everybody. And so I'm interpreting it as Jack is dying because Jack is a Nephilim. Losing his grace probably affects him on a completely different level than it does a normal angel, because angels, grace and stuff like that, they're in a human body, so they could, like, who they are, is their essence is tied to, is still being there. So their grace being taken isn't completely erasing all that they were. It takes a huge chunk of who they were. But I think in Jack's case, it's like literally his angel side is like half of who he is. So half of all he is kind of gone. And so maybe it's attacking that angel side of him being gone, maybe is acting like an antibody or something, and is attacking the other side of him because it doesn't have the angel side to balance it out. So that negative space is kind of attacking the human side of him, potentially. I don't know. Or maybe it's just in general, like, without his powers, like, because let's not forget too, Jack isn't a normal child either, because he's actually only like, what, at this point in time, like a couple months old, potentially, because he rapidly aged, and maybe his human body is finally catching up to him without the whole angel aspect of being a Nephilim. I don't know. Whatever it is, I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be something he hides from the others, because it's like, oh, he's finally got the recognition now, at least Cassio's, and potentially, be asked to do more stuff. So it's like he probably doesn't want to risk it, or at the very least, it's like, I've got other stuff I want to do, and so I can't let this slow me down. we'll see in the long run what Jack ultimately does. But I'm very interested to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to the series premiere of Legacies, a great series premiere. I very much like the structure of the show immediately, because it's like, rather than it just being like, oh, this is in Mystic Falls, which obviously most of the Vampire Diaries took place in, it is more specifically a school setting, which obviously that played a part early Vampire Diaries, but it wasn't as big of a part. Like, obviously in this show, it's a much bigger part because this is a school for the supernatural, which is kind of an interesting element. And there's certain things that come up in this episode that, like, I forget, because I feel like a lot of it tackles, like, stuff that, obviously the basics of the whole, like, supernatural world, which obviously you get reminded every so often, but it's just, like, stuff you basically will learn early day Vampire Diaries, because I don't remember a lot. It's been a very, very long time since I've seen any of the earlier seasons of the Vampire Diaries. If you're curious, like, I've only ever seen each season of each show, the Vampire Diaries, as well as the originals. I've seen them all once when they originally aired. So a lot of, if I haven't subsequently gone back to rewatch a lot of that, so my brain is kind of blank on some of that stuff. But nevertheless, kind of focus on the show in front of us. It's kind of interesting that when stuff goes down, Alaric brings Hope out. But I guess it kind of makes sense because Hope is pretty much, I think the argument sounded to be like she's the most powerful person at, the school, because she is the tribrid is the word she would kind of say. She is like the only one of her kind. So it's kind of like, yeah, she's kind of special in that regard. So I guess like when you're trying to handle anything, kind of bring the big guns with you. It is kind of interesting that this all ties back to Landon, because I thought that was kind of interesting. I figured that might play a part, because obviously that came up at the tail end of the originals. She ran into him in Mystic Falls, and now it kind of like turns back around, because it turns out like after that dance, that was like the second to last episode of the series, and then it's just like apparently in between, because we don't know how much time has passed in between the original series finale and this premiere, but it was long enough to the point that Landon actually moved away. He's got a foster brother named Raphael, but it turns out Raphael is a werewolf. Their family, being super religious, is thinking he's possessed by a demon and stuff like that because of his anger issues, just the way he's been kind of acting lately. And so what I'm curious about is, in that regard, like, because Raphael was like, yo, no matter what happens, we've always got each other's back. So I'm guessing when he was living in Mystic Falls, he was living with Raphael then, and like they were under because they're foster brothers, but it seems like they probably have always had each other's back, potentially. I don't know, because Raphael's dad would, not Raphael, but Landon's dad kind of comes up in conversation of like kind of the terrible shit he would do to Landon. So I don't know like how much of their lives they spent together, but for them to have a bond where it's like where you go, I go, kind of seems like they've been around each other for a while. So I'm kind of assuming that they were together back like during the events of the originals. But nevertheless, he gets brought to the school. The moment the Vervain didn't work on him, I was like, oh, something special about, the compulsion. I'm using the wrong words here. I do apologize, and I'm making this extra confusing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about that. But it's like, filling him in on the supernatural, which I think is kind of pretty neat. It's kind of what I was talking about. Like, if you haven't seen the originals or the Vampire Diaries, which is kind of weird that you would jump right to this show, but it's like, even if you didn't remember a lot of the basics for whatever reason, like, even though I said, like, some of the shows had a tendency to kind of remind you every once in a while anyway, it's kind of nice that it kind of give you, like, a supernatural breakdown. Because they probably are doing that for people who might not have ever seen the originals or the Vampire Diaries to know, like, how the supernatural world works in this universe. So, that is kind of neat. I'm also surprised, and it's kind of interesting that it seems like Lizzie and Josie, Alaric's twin daughters, are going to be like main characters in this, which is interesting. Like, I guess I didn't realize it was they probably popped up in a lot of promotional material, and I just probably didn't put two and two together, because they've always been like established characters in the Vampire Diaries, but like, obviously, this is probably the first time that they kind of take center photo. Because for one, they're very powerful witches. They've had magic ever since they were little girls. Plus, they're the last of the Geminis to a certain degree, because there's the whole Kai situation, and he's just kind of trapped in another universe. There's that whole situation. So that's where you're kind of like, okay, so it's kind of interesting. And you kind of really get to know them. This is the first time you've ever really got to know them for an extended period of time. Like, Alaric's kind of breaking things down, because it seems like Lizzie kind of has she kind of seems like she's kind of all over the place. I think her witch powers combined with just her being a teenager kind of sends her emotions kind of flaring a lot. We see her kind of just smashing stuff around just because Raphael kind of turned her down. And it also seems like she's kind of blunt. It seems like she doesn't really know how to really gel well with people, because she was bringing up the fact is, oh, like, at least now that we know your girlfriend died, now we know you're single and stuff like that. It's like, geez, why would you say that? Like, I think she's just socially kind of awkward in that regard, but still. And then it seems like, and Alaric kind of points it to be like, the reason why Lizzie's kind of like that, it's because of Joe's side of the family, the Geminis, kind of all that darkness, it travels in the family and kind of messes with her. Whereas like Josie's kind of pulls from more his side of the family, where it's kind of like she's so concerned with other people's happiness in the regard of like she kind of has codependency issues, is kind of what Alaric kind of puts it as. It's really interesting we see that, because we see the whole complicated situation with her ex, which her ex sucks so much. Probably see why you broke up, but it was like seeing who she is. It's probably like Penelope probably broke up with Josie. But basically, there's the whole MG situation of trying to get him to kiss her and bite her, and being so excited. The look on her face when she sees Josie is there. It's like, that's your ex, and like you're so happy to make her bother her. Because I was like, why are you going after MG specifically? And it's like, because you know that's Josie's friend, and you know you get a rise out of her. It's like, are you getting off by just like upsetting your ex because it's like, oh, you'll never do better than me, I'm able to take everything away? Like, what satisfaction do you get from just being a complete other douche, you know? That's what I'm curious about. And it makes you go, how did you and Josie even get together? But then again, I guess that just comes to the fact is maybe Josie saw what she wanted to see. Could we even see that a little bit with her and Raphael? Because like you can tell her and Raphael kind of hit it off. Even Raphael, like, is kind of like, no, like, you caring a lot, it's never a bad thing. But then she's trying to spin everything and be like, no, go talk to Lizzie again. She, things were a little rough before, but things will get better. Because even Lizzie's like, oh, I want to talk to Raphael. I'm gonna make things happen with him, because she's trying to tell Josie to kind of get a new crush, because it'll help her get over her ex and everything. You could tell how much it's breaking Josie's heart, because Josie kind of has a thing, but it's kind of like people tend to go after Lizzie is kind of how she feels. So she just kind of assumes like, no, go after Lizzie, because obviously Lizzie has a thing for you. So I should just, so I think that's going to be an interesting aspect of the show going forward, but just because, that's probably going to lead to some, them being twins and everything, but eventually it's going to end badly, because it's just going to be like, eventually Josie's just going to be tired, because she'll feel like probably like all you ever do is take. Like, what about me? What about what I want? You never care. It's always about what you want. I feel like that could easily be where their situation goes. But hey, that early prediction. So there's that. It never crossed my mind until the end of the episode when they were like, oh yeah, the sheriff is putting Vervain in the coffin and stuff. I'm like, why would the sheriff know anything about vampires and stuff like that? And then lo and behold, it turns out to be Matt. I'm like, of course, I completely forgot that Matt was sheriff. And it's like, of course, Matt has the biggest, problem with vampires. Like, Matt's always, obviously supernatural in general. He's got his complicated history with them, but still, it's like, of course, Matt would be putting Vervain in a lot of stuff, making sure that no one gets messed over. Because we don't know outside of the school, like, how big the supernatural world. I mean, I'm sure Matt keeps a tight watch over all that, but it's like, we don't know what, like, the supernatural world is like in Mystic Falls now. Like, we can see that the school is kind of the main place, but still, there might be some other supernaturals just kicking it in Mystic Falls. Anyway, maybe not, because it seems like the main focus is always going to be the school, so we probably won't worry about things in town to a certain degree. I mean, we're still in Mystic Falls after all, so. But it was the whole situation of, obviously, we're dealing with Hope after after everything she went through in the originals. She's lost her mom, she's lost her dad, and it's just, she has the rest of her family, but it still doesn't make up for the fact is mom and dad are gone. The two most important people in your life are gone. And so it's that situation of she's trying to keep her distance from people, even to the point Alaric is actually kind of being not only her headmaster, but her training partner, and also being her friend, because it's like, yeah, I'll stop doing this the moment you start being friends with other people, because he even tries to get Lizzie to do it. But Lizzie's like, the fact of the matter is I've tried ever since she's been at this school, because she's been at the school since she was like 7. Like, since we were 5, I tried. This age, I tried. But she never tries, because it's like, oh, well, all the stuff that, Hope's been through, it's like, Oh, geez. Like, she's the only one at this school who's been through some stuff. Because let's not forget, Lizzie and Josie never got to know their real mom, Joe. Like, remember, they only know Caroline as their mom, so they never got to know their biological mom, which is, that in itself is a heartbreaking situation all on its own. So it's like everyone has, at that school, literally probably everyone has their own tragic story. We even see Landon kind of has his own situations. That's why I was kind of like, okay, so they're going to wipe his memories, but so what's going to happen there? I was like, because we're getting to know a little bit of his background. It's kind of interesting knowing the background of a character who's just going to get his memory wiped. I was thinking like when Hope was running in her wolf form, I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to bite him and he's going to become a werewolf, so he's going to have to stay. But it's like, no, she has control of her stuff. She's like, you could have gotten killed, but letting her guard down around him finally, which kind of ultimately screws her over, which she feels even worse about, because it's like, you literally let your guard down this one time. The entire time people have been telling, let your guard down, let your guard down. You listen, you followed your heart in this one instance, and it screwed you over because it turns out Landon's potentially a bad guy. What I think is so interesting is he was so adamant about staying there. I mean, obviously he was trying to get away from his home situation, but the question is, how much of that was lies and how much was the truth? Because that's a big part of this. Like, from the very beginning, she opens up the story by being like, hey, their stories always come down to the hero, discovering the hero, the villain, good versus evil. It all comes down to perspective. Like, depends on what your perspective is. I'm like, using her dad, for example. A lot of people look at him as being the evil man that he was. But we all know Klaus is a very complex person with a lot of family, dad and mom issues himself, mainly dad issues, but still, he was a complex person. I still have always chalked it up as after everything that Klaus went through, I think he was a good guy in the end. That's just me. But it begs the question of like, is everything what it seems? Because Landon going there, was this all a setup for that, getting close to Hope and everything? Because obviously it turns out he is a supernatural, which is something I was trying to refer to earlier with the whole like, oh, vampires can't compel other supernaturals. It's like, did I remember that or not? I couldn't remember that. But then it was like, I think what kind of confused me too is like, because I'm so used to the Michelsons compelling other vampires and stuff like that. But then it's like, the Michelsons are the Michelsons. They're the originals. So they kind of have their power to kind of compel anyone, so that's why they're kind of special in that regard. I mean, to be fair, at this point in time, there's only 3 people left that can do that. Marcel, Rebecca, and Cole, so, but no one else will be able to have that full range. So, which does beg the question, like, what is he? Like, it's like, is he a werewolf who hasn't broken his curse yet? Or is he a witch? Begs the question, because it's like, if he was a werewolf, would a werewolf be counted as a supernatural until, or are you only a supernatural once your curse has been activated? Because it's like, because obviously it exists in your system, it's in your blood, but or is he, like I said, is he a witch? Like, I kind of feel like it might be that direction. I don't know. Because we don't know what it is that knife is that he took at the end, what that did. Because, like, the blade starts glowing and then it turns, like, everyone up there to, like, it seems like it almost, like, turns everyone to ash almost on the bus. And so now Hope, doubly pissed because it's like, you used to manipulate me. I'm going to kick your ass. But the question is, like, why did he do it? Did someone put him up to it? Does he have his own reasons? Like, because Landon seems like he legitimately has his own issues. Like, maybe he thinks, where he was trying to find a home at the Salvatore school, maybe someone else gave him a home of like, all you have to do is help me out with this. Like, I don't know, because he doesn't seem like the type of dude that would do that on his own. I mean, to be fair, like, I mean, we have no idea what kind of darkness he is hiding. Like, obviously, we saw the whole situation with him kind of being bullied, so, beforehand, so a lot of that's probably built up. I mean, the question then becomes like, well, because I also forgot, we also, like I brought it up earlier too, is like, there's been a time skip in between that time, him popping up and him popping up here. From when he popped up in the originals to popping up in his premiere, there was a time skip because he moved away. So a lot of stuff probably happened in that time. Stuff happened to him. So that ultimately begs the question, okay, so what exactly? Did he become a supernatural in that time frame? Had he always been one? He just kept it a secret? Is the fact of the matter is, it might be that he only learned about supernatural stuff because of them. Because maybe now he's realizing like, oh man, because it's so interesting, because before he ended up getting dragged away by Josie's spell when she was summoning him, it sounded like there was someone talking to him when like the cell door opened. So it's almost like someone reached out to him at some point in time, maybe in between like him being like, I want to stay here. Maybe he's actually trying to get away from somebody, trying to kill somebody that's after. Like, I don't know. Maybe he's being controlled. We have no idea. Like, because I was wondering, I was like, okay, so who's the main antagonist going to be immediately? Like, it's kind of up in the air. Because, I mean, every other show, like, immediately from the Vampire Diaries, you kind of set Damon up to be, like, the main antagonist because he's trying to do the whole, Catherine situation. And then, like, immediately in the originals, it's Marcel. So it's like, okay, so now it's Landon, but it's like, I'm curious to see what that ends up turning into. Like, because you've got a clear motive from each situation for each show of the Vampire Diaries as well as the originals, like, what kind of snowballed and, what things eventually became. But this, I have no idea what this really is. Like, obviously, the whole point is like, oh, the school, that's the big focus, but what the overarching story is going to be in that regard of like this main antagonist, this threat to their world, I'm so curious what that's going to be, especially considering him potentially being a supernatural. So is it going to be him like revealing to the world about the school that all the supernaturals exist? I have no idea. Because I didn't really expect that to kind of be the twist there. I thought there'd be a twist of like, oh, it still wouldn't work on him or whatever. But I was more so thinking like, oh, Alaric's going to change his mind because it's like, Alaric's a human that works at the school. But to be fair, well, he's not the only human that works at the school, but it's like, hey, we're well versed in the supernatural world, so we can take care of ourselves. And it's all, Landon could eventually learn to do that too. But it's like, hey, you are still at a school filled with predators, vampires being controlled by their hunger like that, wolves losing control of themselves with a turn, and witches being kind of just, the fact is, as we can see, witches can be dangerous, especially when their emotions kind of get into it. We see it with Liz almost literally cutting her dad and just being like, hi daddy, and it's just kind of like mood swings. Like I said, it's a worst time because it seems like it naturally happens with witches, but definitely like witches who are, teenagers. I mean, all of them are teenagers in this regard, whether it be vampires or werewolves. So a lot of that's going to be, obviously there's that click pack mentality of like, oh yeah, like everyone kind of groups up, even though they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be kind of like, oh, so welcoming to others, because they're not trying to get like a whole, I mean, obviously between the three supernatural groups, there's always been like, beef, but obviously we don't want a repeat of New Orleans. I mean, New Orleans is kind of making its way to that direction of being like, oh yeah, obviously even with the human component and everything like that, which there's not really one at this school. So I'm curious to see, like, is Alarc going to be the only one that fills that human component area? I'd assume so. I'm also curious, because it didn't work out so much the last time, what about the whole, like, will we see Hope making any more hybrids? Like I said, things didn't work out the last time. That was, I wonder would there be anything with Roman or not? Probably not. Probably like after him and his sister, like that they probably joined up and just bounced, but that's probably it. So probably no chance of that. Potentially, I don't know. Maybe we'll see more of that. But it does make you wonder in the grand scheme of things, like what the next great evil will be. Because every show kind of has like its end all be all. Because everything eventually led up to Cade and the Vampire Diaries, and everything eventually led up to the Hollow and the originals. Obviously, there were stepping stones in certain regards, especially because there was the whole what was his name, Silas. So I'm just curious, like, what this show's stepping stones are going to really end up being, Because it feels like you've already taken out, like, a lot of the top dogs when it comes to the supernatural, but it's like, hey, there's a lot more surprises in store, I'm sure. But like I said, getting back to it, like, this is where we see Hope really diving into being the trifecta, which she is: werewolf, vampire, well, not vampire, but her blood being connected to the Mycosins and being part vampire in that regard, as well as being a witch, like what that all means going forward. Because I'd love to see her there might be a situation that causes her to make some hybrids. So she might kind of have someone that's, kind of, wasn't his name Henry in the final season of the originals, like a similar situation like that. She didn't really get to use that a lot. I'd like her to see her use that, kind of make more in that regard, not making her just... Because there's no other hybrids in general, right? Yeah. Because obviously she's a tribrid, but there's no even other hybrids left, because Klaus was the last one after her mom died. So, and now that he's gone, there's absolutely none. Not only is she the only hybrid, she's the only tribrid, so it adds an even extra layer of loneliness on top of it all. So, Like I said, this is just me initially just kind of rambling off some thoughts just immediately from this series premiere. I'm very excited to see what they do with this because I've loved this series as a whole, from Vampire Diaries to Originals. I feel like Originals kind of inked it out as kind of being my favorite just because I like the Michaelsons, like that whole family drama, which doesn't take away from like the Damon and Stefan in any shape or form, but it's just kind of like, I don't know. Just to me, it seemed like the originals was a little bit darker in certain regards, but maybe that's just my perspective and my perception of it. So, but nevertheless, I'm very interested to see what this series has in store for us when it comes to the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love that you're the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.